Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Amy Morris. Here are the stories we're following today.
Amy, we begin with two key economic data points that could have a huge impact on trading and a preview from Bloomberg's Michael McKee.
A long day ahead for investors. First up, consumer prices for May. The consensus is for little change to both headline and core, leaving inflation still too high for the Fed to consider cutting rates. This afternoon, the Fed will likely confirm that. Central bank policymakers are not going to change policy today. What will matter is what signals they send about when they might move. For that, Wall Street will look to the so-called dot plot. Will it suggest one cut this year or two? On such data, markets will move. Michael McKee, Bloomberg Radio.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Mike.
And the economy also in focus in Europe this morning. Britain's economic recovery ground to a halt in the run-up to the general election. Gross domestic product was flat in April compared to the previous month. Wet weather contributed to slower retail sales. Manufacturing and construction also fell more sharply than expected.
Now we got fresh eco data in Asia as well, Amy. China's consumer prices rose in May, holding above zero for a fourth month. Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis has more from Hong Kong.
The CPI rose 0.3% from a year earlier compared to a forecast of 0.4%. But deflation persists in wholesale prices. The PPI falling 1.4% from a year earlier. It's the 20th month in a row that factory gate prices have been negative. Economists had expected a drop of 1.5%. The data have fueled calls for more government action to support demand. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Radio.
Thank you, Brian. And sticking with China, Bloomberg News has learned the Biden administration is considering further restrictions on China's access to chip technology used for artificial intelligence. Sources say the administration is targeting new hardware that's only now making its way into the market. The U.S. has already imposed numerous limits on the sale of advanced semiconductors and chip-making tools to the Asian country.
Well, artificial intelligence, Amy, has helped fuel Apple to a record close on Wall Street. The shares soared more than 7% yesterday, adding $215 billion to Apple's market capitalization, made for one of the biggest single-day value adds by any company in history. The record came off the back of Apple's annual Worldwide Developers Conference, where it showcased a number of features related to AI. Dan Ives is an analyst at Wedbush Securities.
This is going to be an AI brain in your phone that's going to understand the user and the owner of the phone the more and more that they're together. So they're going to understand your habits, restaurants, which people you like to pick up the phone from, which you don't, what photos you prioritize over others.
Wedbush's Dan Ives has a price target of $275 on Apple. Right now, the shares are trading around $206.
And Apple shares not the only stock on the move. Shares of Oracle up almost 9% in early trading. After the close yesterday, the company reported better than expected bookings. Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet has the numbers from Oracle's latest earnings report.
It suggests continued momentum for the company's effort to compete in cloud computing against its larger tech rivals. Oracle said total remaining performance obligations, a measure of future contracted sales, increased 44% to $98 billion in the fiscal fourth quarter. Analysts on average were estimating $73.9 billion. Oracle also announced a new agreement to make its namesake database available on Google's cloud infrastructure. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
Okay, Charlie, thank you. Now let's turn to politics. Former President Donald Trump's influence on the Republican Party was made clear in yesterday's primaries. Republican Maine state lawmaker Austin Theriault, endorsed by Trump, won the chance to try to unseat one of the most conservative Democrats in the House of Representatives. Theriault defeated Mike Sobolewski in the Republican primary in a district that was rocked by a mass shooting last year. Theriault will face three-term incumbent Democrat Jared Golden.
And in South Carolina, Representative Nancy Mace, who went from a critic to an ally of Donald Trump, also won her primary with 56.8% of the vote. Mace had joined 7 of the farthest right members to oust former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. McCarthy endorsed Mace's opponent and donated to a group called South Carolina Patriots PAC, which spent more than $2.1 million against Mace.
And in Nevada, Army veteran Sam Brown won the Republican primary for the U.S. Senate seat, receiving 59.6% of the vote. Brown was endorsed by Donald Trump shortly before primary day. He will face Democratic incumbent Jackie Rosen in November. That sets up a fierce battle that could decide control of the Senate. That Nevada seat is rated a toss-up by the nonpartisan Cook Political Report.
And well, now the presidential race may have just gotten a bit more complicated. The incumbent's son is now a convicted felon. Hunter Biden has been found guilty on 3 federal counts for buying a firearm at the time he was using crack cocaine. We get more from Bloomberg Law host June Grasso.
The prosecution just presented a mountain of evidence, including Hunter Biden's own words in his memoir, including testimony from his ex-wife and ex-lovers.
Bloomberg's June Grasso knows Hunter Biden chose not to take the stand in his own defense. As for the political impact, Bloomberg Politics contributor Jeannie Sheehan Zaino says that's still not clear.
We have seen some polling on this. For instance, Emerson did a poll and they found, similar to the reaction to Trump's conviction, that about 6 or 7 out of 10 American voters said it wouldn't impact their vote whatsoever. But that left about a quarter of Americans saying it might impact them. And in this case, about 11% of those were Democrats.
Bloomberg Politics contributor Jeannie Sheehan Zaino says Hunter Biden is facing another trial on tax charges, even closer to the November election.
As for the presidential race, Amy, a new poll done by the Pew Research Center says the world has more confidence in President Biden than it does in former President Trump. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the numbers.
Pew says this is a poll done in 34 countries. It found a median of 43% saying they trust Biden to do the right thing in world affairs compared to 28% from Trump. People had more positive assessment of Biden than Trump in 24 countries, while Trump led in Hungary and Tunisia, and the two were effectively tied in 8 others. But this comes as well at a time when global faith in U.S. democracy is waning. A median 4 in 10 told pollsters that democracy used to be a good example for other countries to follow, but that it no longer is. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
Thank you, Ed. Time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Amy. The full House will vote today on whether to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress. House Republicans have been demanding that the Justice Department turn over audio recordings of President Biden's interview with Special Counsel Robert Hur. The interview was part of Hur's investigation of classified documents found in Biden's home and office. Garland has provided a transcript of the full interview, but not the audio. Some Republicans believe the transcript differs from the recording. Democrats say Republicans just want the audio to use in anti-Biden ads. Atlanta police have arrested a suspect in the deadly hijacking of a bus. Police responded to a report of gunfire on a bus and a possible hostage situation. When police arrived, a pursuit ensued over 2 counties. 17 people, including the driver, were on the bus. A victim with a gunshot wound later died at the hospital. Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens.
This individual has held someone to a driver at gunpoint across multiple jurisdictions.
The suspect with multiple arrests, a 39-year-old man from Stone Mountain, was arrested as the bus was disabled by a SWAT vehicle. Hamas says it has given Qatari and Egyptian mediators its reply to the U.S.-backed proposal for a ceasefire in Gaza, seeking some amendments on the deal. Hamas and the smaller Islamic Jihad militant group said they were ready to deal positively to arrive at an agreement and that their priority is to bring a complete stop to the war. The foreign ministries of Qatar and Egypt and White House officials were examining the response. The care of migrant children is drawing concern from those on Capitol Hill. Bloomberg's Nancy Lyons reports.
A bipartisan duo of senators is launching an investigation into the care of migrant children being held in federal facilities. Senators John Ossoff, a Democrat, and Marsha Blackburn, a Republican, are concerned about reports they've received of dangerous conditions for children being held by U.S. Customs and Border Protection while they await processing at the border. The two are asking Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas to report back on facility conditions and protections against labor and sex trafficking. In Washington, Nancy Lyons, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Amy.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Time now for our Bloomberg Sports Update, and for that, we bring in John Stashower. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Amy. The Yankees are rolling. Season high, 27 games over 500. They're 26-11 on the road. They're 16-1 versus the AL Central. A 10-1 rout in Kansas City. Austin Wells belted a 3-run homer. And then in the 7th inning, home runs for both Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton. Judge's traveled 436 feet, landed in the fountain, and then Stanton's went 10 feet longer. Yanks are 39-4 in their history when both have homered in the same game. The only problem with the Yanks right now is Anthony Rizzo. He's 1 for 33 in June. Also, the Orioles remain right on the Yankees' heels. Baltimore shut out Atlanta 4-0, only 2.5 games behind. The Mets back home, a couple of costly errors, a 4-2 loss to the Marlins. Phillies got 2 home runs from Kyle Schwarber, beat the Red Sox 4-1. The Nationals won 5-4 in Detroit. When last season ended, Aaron Rodgers only took 4 snaps all year, so the Jets need a more winning attitude, and then the star quarterback didn't show up for the start of a mandatory offseason minicamp. The Jets coach is Robert Saleh.
Aaron and I spoke before OTA started. He's been very good in communication. He's been here the entire time. It's inexcused, but he had an event that was very important to him, which he communicated.
Son Reddick, the pass rusher, the Jets acquired from Philadelphia, also a no-show. He's looking for a new contract. Both Rodgers and Reddick will get fined. NBA Finals Game 3 tonight in Dallas. The Celtics are up 2-0. May not have Kristaps Porzingis. He missed 5 weeks of the playoffs with an injury to his right leg, and now there's an issue with his left one. U.S. Open tees off tomorrow without Jon Rahm. He withdrew with a foot injury. Rahm now on the LIV Tour. Did not play well in the first 2 majors. Recently missed the cut at the PGA. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports, Amy and Nathan.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager. A busy Wednesday has finally arrived. In just a couple of hours, we get a final read on inflation in May, consumer prices, before the Federal Reserve issues a policy decision for the month of June later this afternoon. The event investors have been waiting for all week. Ahead of it, we are joined now by Yelena Shulyacheva, senior U.S. economist at BNP Paribas. Yelena, happy double whammy Wednesday. Let's start with what's coming first, the consumer price read. Are we back on the cooling inflationary trend?
I think we are on a gradual cooling trend for inflation, but is it really good enough for the Fed to start discussing the start of the cutting cycle? I think they're carefully watching, but what they need to do is to really gain enough confidence that inflation is on the right path. And I think today's number will just be one of 3 readings that they will need to see, at least 3 readings that they need to see to gain such confidence if it's on the right path.
What do you see coming out of today's CPI print that could give the Fed that kind of confidence that inflation's back on the right path?
I mean, we had 0.3% on core inflation, and that's a good number. But the key point here is that it's just one of a few, and they will need to see more from that. I think inflation is on the right path. Maybe we're not going to see too much disinflation or deflation from the goods sector anymore. So we really, really need to see that services sector starting to engage in a disinflationary trend. So that's what we're looking for, in a few key services sectors.
Do you see this CPI data having any impact on what the Fed produces when it comes to the summary of economic projections, the dots?
I think the summary of economic projections will be upgraded to show core inflation at 2.8% for the year as a whole. So, the first quarter of the year was definitely higher than the Fed expected, so they just really need to mark to market for that. But I think that as the year progresses, we will see a little bit more of disinflation, which will allow the Fed to start cutting rates by the end of the year.
When do you think we see that first cut? I mean, we've only got a few meetings left before the end of the year.
We are projecting the first rate cut in December, and the economy may get to the point at which it will probably allow the first rate cut to happen in September. But I think that that election really matters here. The Fed will be faced with too many different scenarios of how the economy will evolve in 2025. So for them to choose which way it will go, it will really require a little bit more clarity on the path for fiscal policy, for other important policies such as immigration and tax policy and so on and so forth. I think the Fed will be patient to wait until they get such clarity after the election.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed by 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, SiriusXM, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Amy Morris. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.